revenue is obviously so important to anybody's business, right? We're not all Mother Teresa. Like we are trying to make a profit here and like provide for ourselves and build a business. And AUM, it's to me a vanity metric. Like it's, oh, I have so much in AUM. Like who cares? Like, are you doing a good job for clients? Are you providing them value? And are you collecting a fee that is reasonable for that value?
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Next Mile. I'm your host, Kyle Van Pelt, co-founder at Milemarker. Today we have a repeat guest. We have Lacey Shrum, founder of SmartKX, and she's the only person where you are going to see both football game analysis and overall football analysis right next to revenue analysis for advisors in the same LinkedIn post during football season on a weekly basis. Wonderful recaps if you haven't found them. Lacey, thanks for coming back on the show.
Thanks so much for having me. Is there any better content out besides revenue and football? I struggle to find anything.
Yeah. I mean, people say you need to focus and simplify. And I think you've really boiled it down to what matters, like revenue, understanding your revenue, and then appreciating football.
Thanks.
Yeah. Okay. I got to ask you, how did that start? Like what where you were just like, all right, I'm going to talk about what happened in football this week and also what's going on with SmartKX. Like what was the impetus there?
Yeah. So obviously SmartKX, I try to share a lot of what I'm seeing with advisors out there doing, because this is something that advisors aren't talking about. Like they don't really discuss their revenue or all the things that I think are exciting, like how they're billing, when they're billing, what issues they have, different ways to cut up the math. And so that's always interesting because we're always getting advisors who are like, what is everyone else doing? And what am I missing? So that's obviously why we talk about revenue, but the football thing, I just love talking about football on Monday mornings. And I love NFL. I went to Texas, so huge Texas fan, and I couldn't really get, like, only so many people will indulge you. And so I was hoping on LinkedIn we could get some more controversy. And it's really funny. Like some people are like, this is so cool. I try to point out like funny, quirky things that I see, which makes it fun. And some people will write and they'll be like, I don't know what you're doing with this. And I'm like, just having a good time. Sorry.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, because for example, I just went while we were here and I pulled this up. It's not always, was the offense efficient this weekend or anything? I mean, we've got great stuff like the Seahawks jerseys were ugly, too tight, and too short. Obviously, a nice neon target for the Packers defense. Give me those traditional jerseys. I mean, that's the type of recap I really think we need, right?
Thanks.
Not to make it all about fashion. You also said too, Tomlin is by far the coolest coach in the league. Heck yeah, with the successful flea flicker this weekend. So you're really trying to have a full encompassing analysis of this. And perhaps my favorite, dropping the ball before crossing the goal line after a 40-yard run, no less, is heartbreaking to say the least. Don't be this person on your team. Carry whatever your ball is like a newborn baby until the job is done.
That's right. I'm also an expert in newborn babies. So
You are. I love that one because I do think with especially if it's your team, if somebody drops the ball before the goal line trying to flex, like there is nothing more infuriating than that.
No.
Crazy.
And it's so arrogant and it's so just unnecessary.
It's crazy. But so watch this segue. The ball that advisors need to be carrying like a newborn baby in their business is their revenue. I think this is something I've become pretty passionate about. Is the whole industry loves to measure AUM, and that's great. I mean, that's a wonderful thing. But if you have $100 billion and you charge 1 basis point on all of it, that is the revenue on what you pull from those assets is what matters to your firm, for your staff, for the way that you're growing, for how you're doing everything. And that is what you spend all of your time focused on, right? Is trying to make sure that people have a good grasp and handle on their revenue.
Exactly.
So open-ended thing of like, what are you seeing when it comes to that?
Yeah, I love the segue. Revenue is obviously so important to anybody's business, right? We're not all Mother Teresa. Like we are trying to make a profit here and like provide for ourselves and build a business. And AUM, it's to me a vanity metric. Like it's, oh, I have so much in AUM. Like who cares? Like, are you doing a good job for clients? Are you providing them value? And are you collecting a fee that is reasonable for that value, where you can run a decent sized business. So advisors love to get caught up on the AUM metric, and I just think it's a vanity metric. So we're really focused on a whole revenue system. So yes, AUM fee calculations, that's really big for us. We are experts in the calculation space. We can calculate almost anything advisors dream up. I do get like one or two a year that are crazy, but that's for another post. And then the other aspects of revenue that do get forgotten are, one, the documentation. So are you documenting what you say you're going to bill and then actually billing from that? Those two things are held together manually. And then the third piece, which is really the revenue analysis, that I think the most important metric for an advisor is what is their average blended rate across all of their assets. Because most advisors don't know this number, and therefore they don't have a way to, AUM is the only goal. And like I said, it doesn't matter if you bring on 100 million more in AUM, like what are you billing on it? What is it costing you to service? So these three pieces together, the AUM fee calculation, the analysis, the revenue numbers and analysis, and then the ability to document and adjust your fees. So you can see how that goes in a full circle. You can look at your revenue. You can say my blended rate is, let's say, 90 bips. I've got Kyle. He's over here only paying 60 bips. And I've got Judd over here and he's paying 120 bips. This is out of sync with my averages. Do I want to raise my averages? Do I need to fire Kyle? Do I need to increase his fees? If you want to increase his fees or change it, because we have that third piece in there, you can easily adjust the fees right on the spot. So finalize the contract, send for signature, update the fees. That's something we saw advisors taking 2 to 3 weeks to get done just because of the logistical nightmare. So total revenue loops there.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right. You talked about the blended rate and how you all are great at calculating this. I think this is awesome because it does take the whole revenue. The way people think about revenue in this space is AUM times their blended rate, which is what it is. I'm just curious, maybe a hot take, but what percentage of advisors do you think could guess their blended rate within 10 basis points?
Within 10, probably most advisors, the standard is always 100 bips on the first million. So most advisors will say 85 to 90. And usually we're getting anywhere in the 60s to high 70s when we run that number. It's not you asking them, it's that when you start really digging into, because they're like, oh, I manage $100 million. It's 100 bips, it should be $1 million. And it's like, your revenue is only 600,000. Like, where's the disconnect? That kind of piece is surprising. And we also have a tool now where you can plug in info from your ADV and back into what your revenue should be. And I use that almost every call I get on with an advisor. I'll say like, oh, it looks like your revenue should be about X, 1.2 million. What is it? And they're like, oh, it was 8. And you're like, well, there's $400,000 that we can pick up there. So
yeah, that's awesome. There's a ton of value in that. All right. So let's talk. We're a data company. We like to supply a lot of the data for calculating things like this. Where does the data come from to be able to run these calculations? You've talked about ADVs. I know we've talked about a bunch of other stuff. I'm sure Excel probably plays a pretty big role in some of this too. But where are you pulling data from to be able to do these calculations and run this analysis?
Yeah, so the actual calculations, like what is actually happening, comes from two places on a fee. One is the client agreement. So it says, Kyle, we're going to manage these 5 accounts for you. It's going to be on this billing schedule. And we have these exceptions, this flat fee, whatever it is. That is written down somewhere. So that drives the actual calculation process. We get that information from the agreement. We can document that for firms. We can document that for them so they can send it to their clients and use it directly from there. And then we also, to calculate, of course, you need the AUM. So we can get that from places like you at Milemarker. We can grab that AUM on a daily basis and the different positions in there and values and use that against the calculator to put that output as the fee that's due. We can also take it from the custodians, just depending, if they're smaller custodians, we take that nightly or on a weekly basis and can calculate when the fees are due.
Yeah. Okay. One thing we see often at Milemarker is people will try and, or one of the reasons they'll come to us is, hey, we were relying on this Excel workbook where we were trying to pull data from portfolio accounting, custodian, whatever. And the workbook now breaks because there's too much data that like it just crashes or Excel will crash. Do you run into that a decent bit too?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I love an Excel because I can usually break it in like 2 seconds or find where it's broken. Because it's so easy to break. Like it just, a casual mistype, a formula that is incorrect that gets copied and pasted for months after years. It's not reliable on the input, but then it's also not reliable on a check. So like we have multiple automated and some manual ways of checking that the calculations are correct. Like you don't have that in Excel. You are wholly dependent on one single point of failure. So we do see a lot of that. We've been able to help a lot of advisors who are reliant on a spreadsheet and almost worse, like reliant on one key person to manage that spreadsheet, whether it be an individual or a partner, maybe they're parting ways, an individual that doesn't want to be there anymore. There's just a lot of pressure on an Excel spreadsheet that it's really not built for.
Yeah. Yeah. Well stated. All right. Let's talk about firms as they grow. So we found that there's sort of these breakpoints where complexity grows as firms grow, different areas where they're getting to. And it seems like from one stage to another, somewhere between 500 million and a billion in AUM as the metric we use is where like that complexity seems to grow exponentially. But from your perspective, what about that size makes the complexity increase for a firm as they get there?
That size stands out to me because at 500 million, you probably have 2 or 3 advisors, maybe more junior advisors that have come up with the firm owner. And at 500 million, you are probably looking at other books to take on and other more probably established advisors, or you have a few established advisors, but that volume is increasing. And so as you're bringing on new people with very established patterns in business for fee billing, particularly, they have an idea of how they want it, how it's been, how it should be. And they're very unlikely to want to change that method. So then you might have anywhere from 500 million to a billion. We're running 2 different fee systems. Maybe we're running quarterly and we're running monthly, or we do a blended and a hurdled. So it gets very complicated, and the advisors, anytime with a client, you don't want to cause any friction or need them to re-sign, but especially in a transition. And so you just kind of move everyone the way they are, promise clients that it will stay exactly the same. And then now you've got this firm that's running 2 very different fee schedules or fee methods, and it just kind of spirals out of control there. So I agree with you about that size is when you see it start to happening. And especially if it's your first tuck in or your first advisor that's coming on, you want to be agreeable and make it like eliminate as much friction as possible.
All right. You said something in there, which is, hey, they're probably starting to think about adding other advisor books. And that clicked to this thing for me that you were starting to hit on, but I've heard and had a lot of conversations about, which is all these firms that are growing by acquisition so much. There's a lot of focus on what tech do they use? What type of client do they serve? What type of demographics do they have? How much organic growth do they have? All of this stuff. But it seems like their billing method is a little bit of an afterthought. So I've had quite a few conversations where it's like, yeah, we've acquired 5 firms this year. And I think all 5 of them had different billing methods, and different from how we, like our core firm, ran it. And it's sort of just up to the finance team to figure out what to do with that. We can dive deeper on this a little bit. But my first question to you, high level, is should firms just continue running the billing cycles, how they like all shapes and sizes, how they're coming in? Or do you think that they should go through a process like a portfolio management conversion that a lot of people do when they do an acquisition? Because there's so many firms that'll be like, this is our system. I know you're using a different one. We're converting you into the way we do things. But yet so many of them don't do that with billing. Do you think they should be or doing it differently?
I would take one step back because the deal makers don't care, right? Like the people that are making deals, who are selling, who are buying, like they don't care how this is going to get implemented. Like they are buying the revenue and they're buying the book of business. And so I think taking one step back from that and saying, like, let's look at the actual revenue and those numbers that I described. What's your average client size, your average blended rate, your average spend per client? How does that relate to your overall book? I think there's so much value for both sides of the deal in that case, because it cuts out so much time and risk of doing due diligence for both sides. Like, you can show up with this piece of paper that shows you those metrics and your trends over time. Both acquirers and firms looking to be acquired are like, this saved us hours of time. It's sort of like getting a term sheet instead in front of like actually signing the deal. So I think that exposes a lot of the issues that you describe, maybe not so much for the deal makers, but for the next set of individuals that come to handle this. It will start exposing things. So many acquirers tell me, yeah, we had no idea until we got into this book, and then we're trying to convert it. How many like potholes, for lack of better words, hopefully no landmines, but potholes there were in their billing. If you have these metrics, great. Another great thing, if you're looking to be acquired, is to say, I have all my contracts are signed, the fee billing set up, they're signed, they're agreed to, they have the assignment clause. To an acquirer, that's just like gold. Like,
Yeah.
you found a gold mine with that. So there's a lot of work before we get into integrating systems. But I think from a risk and compliance standpoint, in any time you are responsible and you're signing the ADV, you've got to be responsible when you're signing the ADV and know what you're doing, and eliminating variables is the best way to do that. So whether that's having a standalone billing, which a lot of our larger acquirers do, and they are able to flip the switch and announce the acquisition and go live with billing immediately the next day. Whatever it is you do, if you're responsible for signing that ADV and representing your firm in that contract, you have to have some sort of orderly system, or you're just kicking the can down the road of a regulatory and probably litigation nightmare.
Most firms that you run into are either billing quarterly in advance or quarterly in arrears, or maybe now you might hear like a monthly in advance or monthly in arrears. But there's one that you said you've been coming across more and more, which is average daily balance reconciliation, right? But there's a different way you put it. But talk to me about what you're seeing, which was, and I think what you were telling me off air is, the reason people never did this before is it was so hard to like keep up with. It was really painful. But with your technology, you're starting to see more of this and it's coming out more. But maybe I didn't tee that up well, but I think you know where I'm going with this. So I'm going to let you run with it.
Yeah, I'll take it. So a majority of the industry bills quarterly in advance based on the last business day's value. So if you're billing for January, February, March, you would take December 31st value and you would calculate the fee for those 3 months. And this is one of those things, like, that's the way it's always been done. And it really was this way for simplicity. I mean, that's the easiest way to implement it. However, there's a lot of flaws there. The biggest one is you are reliant on 4 market days per year for your revenue. So this happened recently in the second quarter, but we got really close. March 31st was pretty high day, if not the highest day of the year. The next week, tariffs were announced and the market just like fell out. And so if you are an advisor and you're billing that way and you didn't look at that and be like, I got really lucky.
Yeah.
Because you did. Like if those would have been announced a week prior, the bottom would have fell out and then you would have billed at the bottom. And so these 4 market days just have such a huge impact on advisors' revenue. And so, however, they are able to bill in advance, which is great when you're running a business. Like that's the best way to bill. So especially if you're starting a business, as most advisors are. So we found that a lot of advisors were like, I want to reduce my risk of 4 market days per year. I still want to bill in advance. And I also want to stop having conversations with clients about cash flows. I also want to stop dealing with clients who are like, oh, I'm going to pull out $1 million, but make sure you do it before March 31st. Or I've even heard where clients will move money every quarter out 3 days before the quarter ends and then put it back in. Like, just so their fee is lower. And so all really great points, all things advisors were struggling with. So we went back and we're like, okay, let's maintain this December 31st value for January, February, March. But then on April 1st, let's look back at the average daily balance of January, February, March, and see what the fee would have been if they were billing in arrears. Combine the two. If the fee would have been more, add that to the next quarter's bill. If it would have been less, reduce it. So you smooth out your market exposure, which is great, but you also have just such an easy conversation with clients who are like, the market's, tanking and you build me at the top. I have all these cash flows. All this market movement is happening. And what you really build me on is not what you're actually managing. And now these advisors that are doing this are like, yeah, we do an average daily balance reconcile at the end of the quarter. It smooths out. It's a more fair. It's way more transparent. And it just ends those conversations, which no advisor likes to be in.
This podcast is brought to you by Turncast. We make game-changing content for fintech and financial services companies. Learn more at turncast.com.
Hey, this is Judd Mackerel. Thanks for listening to this show. I just wanted to ask you one question. What's your technology and data strategy for 2025? If you can't clearly answer that question, I'd love to talk. We are spending some specific time with select firms to really go deep and help you clearly answer that question. We believe that it's one of the things that often holds back firms from really achieving their potential, from really achieving growth, and really getting a lot of the things in the position that they need to be. Things that are holding up the way that you scale, like your workflows, how you manage data around your revenue, how you report all that to your advisors, and getting clarity in all those things. I'm sure there's a lot of very specific things to your business that are really important as well, and we'd love to talk about that. If this is interesting to you, hit me up with an email. My direct email is jud@milemarker.co, and I'd love to hear from you, hear what you're working on, hear what your strategy is, and see if there's an opportunity for us to help you get more clear on that strategy in 2025. Thanks.
All right, speaking of this, I've got to ask you. So still today, there's a lot of people who like to argue online about which is the best fee structure. So did you just find the actual best fee structure rather than flat fee or AUM based, or I should only charge planning fees, or all of these things that all of the altruistic people like to get online and argue about? Yeah, what are your thoughts?
I think the arguing online is a wasted effort. It really, as you're a business owner, I'm a business owner. Again, I just want to get paid as quick as possible with the least amount of friction. Like, I want to make it the easiest for people to use my product and pay me, and then prove to them why they should continue to pay me. And I'm a lawyer, so I'm a hard no against charging by the hour, but also a lawyer. So of course I think my method is the best one out there. But I think the AUM fee billing, it just makes so much sense. There's so little friction with the client. It's free. There's no transactional fee as there is with credit card and ACH, but like, it's a free country. You can bill however you want to bill and like whatever's working for you. But these advisors are not in the business of billing. They're in the business of managing money. So like, try to get billing down to the least amount of time possible so you can go manage money.
That's awesome. All right. Back into the wheelhouse a little bit more. I can stop hunting for hot takes here. I think everybody desires to have automation. And I think this is something you're shooting for, is how do we automate a lot of the data collection and calculation on these things to make it easier? We're trying to do a lot of that. But even though there's a desire, like a lot of things, adoption is still a little bit slower. So in your opinion, what do you think keeps firms from adopting automation in their practices?
I think the biggest piece for firms in our like very small industry is the exposure and the amount of the lack, I should say, of venture in this space, and understandably so. Like, this is not, compared to an Uber, compared to Apple, like our market share is really small and a fraction of that. And so it's hard to attract deep pockets with capital to start throwing money at the problems to solve. So like, if you use products outside our space, I'm always, as someone who develops tech, I'm always just so amazed at like, oh, like I take a lot of things from other products I use and try to implement them, but these large scale systems just have unlimited amount of venture money to throw at these problems. And what you're seeing is the success, and you're not seeing the 98% of the tries that were failures. So I think that makes our industry really unique because we aren't going to attract a lot of deep venture because of our total addressable market. And so for that reason, the automation is just harder to get in every single person's hands to make them have a taste and want more. And so that's probably the biggest holdup to seeing the automation and just kind of being like overtaken by it. I mean, anything on Apple, Apple Pay is amazing. Like it makes it, you don't even know you're paying.
Yeah.
Like, you're just buying stuff on Instagram and you don't have to enter in a single thing and it's on your doorstep tomorrow morning. That's a really hard metric to fight against if you're in our space. So the exposure there for RIAs to see it is tough.
I like it. I think that's true. I mean, that's actually, there's some really good points in what you're saying there about, I mean, not just product development, but business in general. We just don't see 98% of it. You just don't see 98% of it. And I think that's really good. And the way that you laid it out, there's a lot of people who aspire and hope that we will have something that looks like the Apple Pay experience in this industry. And I just, I'm not saying it will never happen, never say never, but because of everything that you're saying, I'm curious if we will ever get experiences truly like that, especially too, because one thing we run into a lot, and I feel like I have this conversation with a lot of the firms we talk to, is the product this industry sells is advice. So it's not like we're shipping boxes, or it's not like something that is incredible. I mean, you could sit 5 of the quote unquote best advisors across from a household, and you might get 5 different approaches, pieces of advice, or ways to handle that same household's case, however they deliver it. So it's difficult to sort of just have like, here is the one way to run and build an RIA. And with that being the case, now we can build really, really elegant, sophisticated technology, which is one of the big reasons why we exist, which is like, take all of those things that are 80% of what everybody does, but we're going to help, pun intended, but we're going to help you with that last mile of your technology to present your firm the way that you want to, because there is no such thing as just a standard way of doing all of this, the way there is with payments or, anything else.
Yeah. And we don't necessarily touch every citizen is not a user for us,
right?
Or an end client. I shouldn't say a user as a firm, but like an end client. So that's our goal, is eliminate clicks. Just like that's our goal. If something takes 10 clicks, I want to make it 8. And just like, how do we continually reduce the friction for our clients? It's to get paid. Just like, how do we continually reduce that friction for them?
Yeah. You guys recently rolled out this pretty cool revenue dashboard that I think is great. And, one of the questions we get often is, what metrics should I be looking at? What metrics are other people looking at? What are the things that are important to pay attention to? So where did you land on that? If somebody asks you that and they say, Lacey, what metrics should I be paying attention to from a revenue perspective or whatever else? What are you encouraging them to do? And what did you guys put on this dashboard?
Yeah, so we got asked that a lot from not only firms, but also just advisors, if they were in a big firm or a big shop, that were like, what should I be paying attention to? What in my silo of the business? And it's outside of product and sales and taking care of our users, right? Like, I'm running a SaaS business, which is very similar to an RIA's business. And so a lot of the metrics that I learned on that side really feed into like, well, how would an advisor look at the same concept? And so the biggest one is like, we call it in SaaS, what's your average client spend? And for them, we call it, what's the average client? What revenue are you from your average client? And really looking at that to dig into like, what does your target client look like? Are they paying you $5,000 a year? Are they paying you $12,000? Are they paying you $500,000 every year? Like, what is your target client? And most advisors weren't really thinking about this. Again, they were thinking about AUM. Well, my average AUM is about $1.5 to $2 million. Okay. Like, what is the revenue off of that? That revenue can also drive things like, am I spending enough time with the people who are paying me the most? Am I spending too much time with those who are underpaying? Because that means those users or those end clients, or the other ones, are subsidizing you helping them. So average client spend's a big one. How does that compare across all your clients? Blended rate is, of course, another big one of what is your blended rate and what do you want it to be? Advisors, like lawyers, have an easy time to negotiate against themselves. And so they like to they like to reduce the fee really proactively, but we put some advisors' average blended rate in front of them and said, okay, your average blended rate is 75. They're like, we want it to be 90. Okay, well, then you cannot take another client that is under 75 or you will be lowering your average.
Yeah.
Very like cut and dry math, but it does help for you to have the conversation with the client. I'd love to reduce your fee, but I can't. Like I have other clients that I have a commitment to that were with me and like, it has to be this for me to serve you well. So we got a lot of advisors asking, what are the things I should look at? So we have a revenue dashboard, both inside with our users' information that they can see what their firm metrics are actually in real time versus individual clients. And then we have a standalone calculator too, that anyone can go in and put in their data and see literally how much money is being left on the table with the fees that they've proactively lowered, with the hopes of really exposing that number to them. You're missing out on 200 grand worth of revenue. Like that's significant. That's an employee plus.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. It's amazing as you go through building these things, like how much the feedback of talking to people leads to what those things are.
Yeah. But we had a feature that we just added a few months ago where I had so many advisors saying, well, we bill in arrears. And I'd say, well, how do you, or any type of billing actually, how are you billing if that client opens a new account, adds $1 million? Oh, it's just so hard to like calculate. So I just wait until the next billing period and then just bill it from there forward. I'm like, okay, so somebody opened an account in the middle of May and you just 45 plus ish days, you just don't bill on it, even though you're managing it and you're earning your money. And they're like, yeah, it's just too much to calculate. And so like, we just built the feature and I'm like, okay, I just paid for our service. Like $1 million is $27 a day. It's quite significant when it adds up. So we call it picking $100 bills up off the ground. There's a lot laying out there.
Yeah. And that goes back, by the way, to how we started this conversation, which is if you were laser focused on revenue, and then therefore you can take your revenue and that's where you can figure out profit and EBITDA, you can handle all these. Whereas everybody just goes, oh, our AUM grew by 30%, but if you're bringing in AUM at massive discounts, then, the numbers that actually matter aren't, but you feel like you're growing.
Yeah. And if you can look at those numbers and then say, I need to make adjustments and have those adjustments be automated with clicks versus sending it to another person on your team, having to fill out paperwork, move the data, move the calculation data. You can just click from there and change it. Like it takes out 90% of the friction of changing fees.
Yeah, I love it. Well, let's talk about friction or taking out friction. As a technology company, we're legally obligated to talk about AI on every single podcast episode. And so it feels like the stuff you're doing with ADVs and things like that is really well designed for AI. But what are you thinking about for AI? How are you using it? How are you leveraging it? What's the plan there?
Yeah, ADVs are a big one. So we've been doing a lot of R&D work on like we're item 5 in the ADV part 2 is our special place where we go. So like, how do we extract that information? And better yet, how do we get that information in sync with what the calculations actually are? So I think that's really cool. I think that will kind of be the first step of how the ADVs will be implemented, drafted with AI. I think that makes sense. I think having a scraper and a reader and an analysis when the regulators get a hold of a tool like that, it's kind of going to be like the world will change because these ADVs are only updated once a year and they are very manual and they are very dependent on the chief compliance officer who's usually not as involved with the business. So I think that'll be really cool. I mean, the AI has already had such an impact just on our ability to problem solve for our users and build new products. And I mean, even just something as simple as like meeting note takers, like the impact that has had on everyone has sped up time quite significantly. So ADVs, client agreements, I would love to get the client agreements in some way, shape, or form to a client to agree to much easier than having to go into a DocuSign and sign in a much easier space, taking it from Apple, just like clicking through.
That's cool. I mean, because I think I've had a couple of different conversations, and I feel like AI either needs to have this sort of like very specific area in the business where it's at right now. So thinking about like the note takers, marketing, I like what you're talking about here of, hey, go get this specific piece of data for me and help me make sure that it's working. Or it needs to be super broad like ChatGPT, or these types of things at the moment. And it's cool to hear how you're thinking about it.
Yeah. And just like keeping things in sync. So just like, hey, you changed this to this, like we checked over here and this thing you're supposed to be connected to is off base. Like even just having that type of knowledge for a compliance person would be amazing. I mean, compliance people are struggling with just calculating their discretionary versus non-discretionary AUM on the ADV. Like that is one of the most common complaints of compliance people. And it's so basic, but it is not easy.
Yeah, for sure. All right. While we're talking about this, we're going to move. We've kind of got our final two segments of the show here. The first one is I'm going to ask you to get out your crystal ball. I think we had you do this before, but I'm going to have you do it again as the world has changed and it's changing quickly. But what do you see coming down the road? What are some predictions you would make about the industry and what's going to happen over the next couple of years in our space?
So we kind of touched on this with like payment processors. I really foresee, I talked about it a few years ago, but the Elon Musk Twitter play, like I see that as really the ability to process payments and move money is so much more mature than it was even 2 years ago. But I see this like culmination of payment processors, like, of course, you could go into like, what is value, holding electronic value into more like social situations. And I see somehow the wealth management industry and wealth advice and investing, while we are a very small industry, that is a huge market for end clients because everybody carries their money with them in their pocket now. And so how do we get that into investable assets? We're seeing some with Robinhood, but like, how is that more social? How are social influencers or people online getting paid in micropayments? And then the next iteration of that will be like, well, what do we do with stored value and stored wealth? Like 5 years ago for Bitcoin, it was like, well, you put it on a private wallet. And like, that is even so outdated at this point. But like, how do we store and use wealth in that digital place on our phone? Because again, you step out and you see that in real life, and then you come back to our industry and you're like, we're still dealing with faxes.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, literally.
We're still dealing with signatures, and like, you can send money, anywhere in the world in 10 minutes, like, and it's there, it's done. You don't think about it. So like the clashing of those two, I thought it would be much sooner than it has been, but I still like truly believe there will be a clash there, and it will be significant for our industry because it's just, the world is going to become even more flat, and that's going to hit our industry like yes, it's a relationship business, but even relationships are changing when we're online. So no, like, I don't know what that will look like, but it's just like this dust storm, like kind of piling up.
It's a good perspective though on how some of that stuff goes. Cause I do think there's a lot of people in our space, understandably, who love to live in the future and who love to talk about all the cool things that are going to happen. And then you're like, yeah, but what about all of the faxes? I mean,
I know.
And it's wild because you're almost like, oh yeah, that's right. That's still a thing, or what about the fact that a lot of the providers, maybe the advisor wants to be very forward thinking, but this 401k provider I work with, or this person over here, like they still require me to print something out, sign it with ink in a pen, and then, send it in some sort of way. So how do you get around that? There's so many pieces of the supply chain of advice that are involved that if they're not all playing the game of automation and streamlining, the weak link will destroy the whole thing.
Yes, I agree. And maybe I'm just getting old, but maybe like 10 years ago, I'd be like, people just won't do business with them. Like those people won't be in business. People aren't going to put their assets with them. But it's like, they are.
Yeah.
Like the small custodians getting their data out, getting the assets out, like those things just are always still there. And so there are a lot of cool things that with a switch, but like the biggest custodian in the industry is just, their UI is the same UI it's been for 20 years. And like people say, why can't they just change it? Why don't they update? And it's like, it is not that easy. Like you make one drop in this massive technology and it just has these catastrophic ripple effects. So it's not just a switch.
Right. I agree. All right, Lacey, we're going to move into the Milemarker Minute. You've done this before, so you're no stranger to how it works, but we're going to move into it and wrap this thing up. You ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. All right. If you could travel anywhere in the world that you've never been to before, where would you go?
Probably in Antarctica.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's a first. Antarctica is interesting. You probably see some penguins.
Yeah.
That'd be cool. Are you a mountains person or a beach person?
Mountains.
Okay. What is the best?
This skin? Come on. Like, I'm fried.
Yeah, that'll play on the audio really well. People will be like, oh, no, I don't know the answer to that.
Oh God, you better not.
What is the best flavor of ice cream?
Oh, Rocky Road.
Okay. 1 year from now, you are celebrating a huge win with the people closest to you that you love. What is the meal that you are choosing to celebrate with all of these people close to you that you love?
Probably easiest steak dinner, filet mignon, cab, medium rare.
Do you have a place where you would go get that? Like, do you have a spot in mind? Is that at home? Are you cooking that at home? What's that look like?
Well, I'm a rancher's daughter, so yes, Montana. Yeah, actually, if you're in Dallas, the Papa's, it's an old steakhouse. It's one of the best steaks I've ever had. High reco.
Right. I like it. I know you're a reader. We talked about this last time. What's the best book you read or listened to in the past year?
Best book this year has been A Tree Grows in Brooklyn.
Okay.
Have you read it?
I like it. I have not read it.
Very Americana.
We're going to link that in the show notes. Okay. And then my final question for you is, do you think Texas football's record is going to be this upcoming season? The Art Manning era. I mean, all the vibes are high in Austin.
Yeah, well, Kyle, I was on the highest vibe in Austin with a man named Vince Young, who took us to the Rose Bowl and a championship. And it has not been high time since. Definitely you want a 10-win season. I think we got that, or we're going to have some problems with Arch. But the SEC is not a kind place to be. I told the Aggies this when they were just dying to go there a few years ago, 10 years ago now. It's like, it ain't smooth sailing over there. So we were talking about this. It is sort of like any given Sunday with the SEC. You don't know who's going to pull out a win. So looking to go to the playoffs.
Right, so
my favorite.
At least 10. I'm sorry.
At least 10. Yeah. I should hope so.
Okay. Yeah. I like it.
And to beat OU at the Texas OU game. That's always a great game. So probably one of the best games, best college games, best football atmospheres. Hopefully it stays for a long time, but it's wonderful.
Yeah, I like it. All right, Lacey. Well, thank you so much for coming on. Great conversation as always. I love talking about revenue because, again, I don't think it gets talked about enough. I love that that's what you're focusing on with your company and what you're building. Keep up the great work with all of the content and everything like that. And thanks so much for coming on the show.
Well, to a Georgia fan, hook 'em horns.
Oh, we're going to edit that part out. No, just kidding. We'll leave it in. All right, everybody. That's been another episode of Next Mile. Please make sure you click follow or subscribe wherever you're listening to this. And if you're kind enough, if you're feeling generous today, go leave us a review on the podcast so that people who've never heard of this show can find great conversations like the one I just had with Lacey. But until next time, enjoy every mile.